Hello and welcome to the first in the 5 of this Blender tutorial. Here we see a preview of what we will be making in this first tutorial. We always start off by deleting the default cube. And here I'm just naming some collections and putting our setup inside a collection and hiding it for now. With Shift A we can add a new sphere. And here we can see the different settings that are possible, but we'll ignore them for now. With Tab go to edit mode, and with R rotate X around the X axis and scale it up with S. By pressing X and Y we'll scale it along the Y axis. Now by selecting one vertex and going to the proportional editing tool, or by pressing O, we can choose which kind of influence we want, and with G and an axis we can move that vertex and it will have influence on the vertices next to it. With scroll we get the range of influence. Now we change it into the shape that we like, and I think this looks about right, so we scale it up, and I think this is a very nice starting shape that we can work with. Now to create that opening in the front, we'll be selecting these vertices. Make sure that when you select them, you have pressed Alt-C, which puts you in the see-through mode. Before we weren't getting those back vertices, and as you can see now with X and vertices, we are also deleting the vertices at the back. Remember, with numpad 1 or 3, or try at the other numbers, we can get different views. I reselected the correct vertices I want and deleted those. Now with Shift A we can create a new plane. We'll scale it up, and since I scaled it in object mode, I'll be pressing Ctrl A and applying scale, so that the scale still remains 1. Now with G I'm moving it to the correct position and deciding which height it will be at. Now we're going to use a modifier to make sure the floor doesn't extend around the hull. So let's look for the Boolean modifier and select the hull, and you can play around with which one you want. In this case we want intersection, so only the intersecting surface will be visible. And through the object setting there I'm just going to apply a smooth shading so it looks nice and smooth. Now I want to start making the rings around the ship, so I'll be selecting these center rings. With Shift E we can duplicate the rings, and with P we can separate them. Now with Tab we can change the object mode, select that ring, and with G we can move it around so we can see it's a different object now. Now let's give this ring a thickness by adding a skin modifier. So in the modifiers tab we'll add a skin modifier. With Tab we can move back to edit mode, and with A we'll select everything, and with Ctrl A we can scale it up or down. Remember, Alt C is to go into the see-through mode. I'm going to do Alt A and then 0.5 to give it an exact thickness. Now we can start adding the other rings. So we will select these two outer rings with Alt click. And again with Shift E duplicate it, P, and then click on separate, tab into object mode, and we have that separate object. But actually I want to join these two objects together. But first let's reorganize our project a bit. So add a new collection, add the hull into this collection. Remember to name them correctly so you know what is what. Now with this rings collection, I will add both of these in here. And by actually clicking both, I will Ctrl J, which joins them together. But as you can see, the skin modifier is still only applied to one of them. So with A we will select everything and then mark root, and this will make sure that the skin modifier is applied to both of them. Now the front of this nose looks a bit strange because both of the objects are passing through each other. So I will be selecting both of those vertices and then through this menu try to merge by distance. These will merge these two together and the skin modifier will behave appropriately, but I didn't really like the look of it, so I did Ctrl Z to revert that change. And I will be scaling this down by 0.5. So from the original scale, it will be 0.25. This is a bit of a quick and dirty fix, but I think it works well enough and it looks alright. Now with Shift A, add a new circle and we will start creating the rings around the hull. Rotate it along the x-axis and scale it up. Make sure to do this in edit mode so that the scale remains the same. This is important for the modifiers so they scale as you would expect. So right now we are moving this circle all the way to the front and applying a new modifier called array. Now we want the array to move along the y-axis and not the x, so we're changing the x to 0 and then trying to change the y value. Changing the y value doesn't seem to do anything, and that is because the circle doesn't have any thickness, so it does copy the circle, but you don't see it because it all is moved towards the exact same place. Now I just quickly redid all those steps and I'm adding the array modifier back. Of course, we still have the same problem when moving the array along the y-axis. Changing the order of the modifiers and now changing the relative offset into a constant offset. It will also work. This will also work if you did not add the skin modifier. Since in this case it is as if there is no skin modifier because the modifier is applied afterwards. Changing with Ctrl A that vertice thickness again to 0.5 or 0.25, I forgot which one. And then changing the distance between the objects of the array to make it fit the hull. Now to wrap it around the hull, we will add a shrink wrap modifier and select the object. As you can see here, the skin modifier is also shrink wrapped, so we can put it in between the array and the skin, and this way the skin won't be shrinked anymore. With G and Y moving along the Y axis, we can put it to exactly where we want and see how many rings we want. Here I see that they nearly align with the vertices, but not exactly. So we can also try to shrink them to the nearest vertice. See if we like that better. In this case, I think I will be just shrinking them to the surface, but you can play around with these settings as well. Now because I want a little bit of one extra ring, which is open, I'll be extending this with E. Also make sure to add a smooth modifier, but this doesn't work because it's a modifier, so we have to add the smoothness to the skin itself. But as you can see, it looks a bit strange. We can do shade flat or shade auto smooth, and what this does, it smooths them only to a certain angle, so the sharp angles will still stay square, but the rest of the angles will be smoothed out. We can also add things to our quick select this way. and this way with Q we can easily access them. Now I am just going to duplicate this ring, delete all the modifiers besides the shrink, the skin modifier, move it to where I want to, and scale it down. Right now I'm looking at the reference below to see where it should be, and then I'll edit the top ring, protection ring, to the circle. Now lastly we can add some materials. We won't be using these definitively, but I always like to add some materials to give a bit of a feel of what it will look like. With Z we can select which view we want, in this case material view. It's a little easier on the computer, and you still get a good idea of the basic colors that we're adding now. I am trying to name them all because a bigger project can get pretty complex later on, so it's always good practice to name them accordingly. So looking at the reference image we had before, doing some dark brown rings, a blue hull, and a brown floor. It doesn't look amazing right now, but that doesn't matter. It's more for the feel and the idea of what it will be later. With Control R we can add some edge loops. And this part here I want to change into a sort of canopy or a bimini. So here I'm selecting all the vertices that are needed for this. Again with Shift-E, duplicating it, P, separate, and we have our own separate object. Quickly naming the material and making it white, or keeping it white in this case. And now from our hull I will delete the vertices there, so we can see the bimini, but as you can see the shrink wrap is messed up. So we'll be selecting all those objects that apply the shrink wrap and apply all the modifiers with Control A. Make sure to go from top to bottom and make sure you select all of them. Now let's try it again. This time also selecting the correct vertices, so don't select the outer ones. Now delete them with X and select vertices. Also remember to do this in see-through mode, so Alt C to switch between them. Otherwise you won't get the vertices in the back. Now let's add a subdivision modifier, which adds more vertices to the mesh. This modifier will smooth out the edges, but we don't want that, so we'll change it to simple and up the detail level to 2. There are a lot more vertices and lines here, and these are a bit excessive, so I will be removing them. So with X and edge loops, we'll delete the edge loops, but this deleted all of them, so we have to select them alternating. So we'll select these two, X edge loops, and that one, X edge loops, and we have a bit of a cleaner bimini. Now by Shift Alt selecting every line alternating from each other, we can create a bit of a relief in the bimini by scaling these lines down. But because of the center point of the object, the scaling is a bit strange. So we will up here select our point to be the cursor, and as you can see this is a lot more even. So we'll scale from here until something that we like. Holding shift while moving or scaling or rotating something will make it go a lot slower, so you can get a bit more precise. Now let's add a second subdivision surface modifier. Keep this one on smooth and not on simple. And with that, we have finished the first step in our 5-part tutorial.